Okay, so we're really in the home stretch of this whole large sugya of ribis and mechila and shibud, all of the different interactions that we've talked about for these many weeks. We're almost coming to a conclusion either today or maybe early next week. But in any event, we're still holding by the. Remember, everything, the underpinning of everything we talk about is the potential for ribbis. Even if we're talking where ribbis doesn't actually become a stated stated in our discussion in the Gemara, it lingers. Ribbis is always in the backs of our minds. Wait, is it okay? Does it suggest ribbis? So we're always worried about it. And the Gemara, in its many instances, gives us a sort of an understanding of why it might not be ribis or is ribis or is a machlekes if it's ribis. So that's really the underlying theme. And then, of course, we have something that's overarching that we discussed the last couple of weeks, and that even if something is not ribis, it isn't ribis, but someone in the back of his mind can suggest, oh, maybe it's ribis or maybe it's not ribis, we don't know. So we say Talmidei Chachamim, the tzurva, the Talmidei Chachamim have to make an extra special effort not to follow and do that. So the tzurva the Rabbanon, so people could actually see the potential of what is a tzurva rabbanan? If it's ribis, it's ribis. If it's not, it's not. What's the chachma? The teretz is that sometimes what we use the term lifnim mishuras hadin, that there are people who go out of their way to not equivocate in any way, so that people maybe will take a more stringent approach, or maybe they'll be a little bit more sort of sanguine about the whole Indian. But that's important. It's important for our Gemara as well. But that's kind of where we are. So now in Samach Zayin Amud Beis, the following discussion: Rav Kana, Rav Papa, Rav Ashi, three great Amoraim, made a statement. Now, what did they say? So if I borrow money from you, say, Jay, I borrow money from you, and I pledge my field, a mashkin, I give you a mashkin of my field, right? That's really the subject of our discussion. And you nominally eat from the peiros of the field to reduce the amount owed. In other words, you're actually reducing it. I lent you 1,000 zuz, and you're going to eat for 100 zuz. So then at the end of the day, all that I have to pay back is 900 zuz. That sounds pretty reasonable. Sounds very straightforward. So these Amoraim would not eat the produce because of a chashash ribis. As we said before, this ribis issue hovers, and people will look at it and say, "Oh, he's getting the benefit of the loan through eating the fruit." And that's really, if it was as straightforward as that, that would be classic ribis, right? I lend you 1,000, and you pay me back 1,000, and I eat 100. So I just made 100 zuz on the field. So they say that we should not. Okay, they made that pronouncement that we should not eat. We should not eat from that um, because it's
Looks like a ribis.
right. But what is it that they would not eat? In other words, they would not eat the produce that came out of it. So then again, the question is, what do you do with it? Do you sell it? Do you hold it in abeyance? I mean, we had all those discussions, but that's not really what we're worried about here. We're worried about whether or not they're going to eat it.
You got to do something with it because you'll die otherwise.
Right. Now, why did these three Amoraim not eat? So the underlying answer is because they're from the Tzurva the Rabbanan. They are from that class of sort of heightened awareness from the Talmidim who said, wait a minute, there's even a Hava Amina, I'm not going to do it. So they are Tzurva the Rabbanan. This is the example of Tzurva the Rabbanan, because they were all great Amoraim. Now, on the other hand, Ravina Ochel Megavaisa. Ravina ate from the field. Now we know from the previous week that Ravina was what we might call a lamed vavnik. He was a closeted gadol. He didn't want people to know who he was, so he acted like everybody else. He did nothing extraordinary to make himself stand out as a Talmud Chacham. That was how Ravina wanted to approach life. So what did Ravina do? He ate it because everybody else was eating it. Only the servant Rabbanon were not eating it, but everybody else was eating it. So Ravina ate the fruit, and these are other Amoraim did not eat the fruit. All right. So that's the discussion. But what's the underpinning of this? What is really going on here? Why is this a question? What does one Mandomer say? What does another Mandomer say? So now, look, we've said this now for weeks, but we never really dove into it to understand. Now the Gemara is going to actually explain the different sides, why they hold what they hold. Okay. Omma Marzutra. So Marzutra says, Man Tama demanda ochel begavaisa. What was the reason Ravina ate it? Okay, let's be practical. Why did he eat it? I mean, it may look like ribis, whether he's at Surva or not at Surva, doesn't matter. Why did he eat it? So here's the point. So the reason why he ate it, because we learned it out from Hegdish. Midid dahava asadei achuza. Okay, so there is a following halacha. If you inherit a field, and that field becomes Hegdish, then, okay, it's Hegdish, it's Kodesh, and Hegdish remains until Yovel. No matter how many years remain, it's still Yovel. After that, it's gone because it goes to the Kahanim, and they take it, and it's part of their Achuzah, and it's gone. There's one caveat, though, and that is that during the period of time that it's in Hegdish, an outsider, not a kohen, an outsider can redeem the field and give money to Hegdish. That's the Torah says you can do that. So, all right. So now what happened was the field went to Hegdish, and someone came along and he redeemed it. Right? Says the Gemara.
We're talking about he's redeeming it for the payros from the field.
Yeah. That he can. That's right. It still will go back to the Yovel. Yovel, he will lose it.
Right.
But from the time that he is that redeems it, he can eat the payros.
But that's all he can do.
Well, he worked the field and eat the payros.
But the land never goes transfer.
No, the land never comes in. No, it's kind of a temporary thing.
Right.
And the Torah says, Afagavta ka'ochel perutuva. So here's the connection. It's a nice piece of field, a nice piece of land, and it produces a whole lot of fruit or wheat or whatever it produces. The halacha tells us, the Torah tells us, that you have to pay. How much do you have to pay to redeem? Is it random? No. Torah says that you pay one zuz for each year. Whatever a zuz was worth at the time, you pay one zuz for each year remaining before the next Yovel. So the most that you can pay is 50 zuz. Let's say you bought it right after Yovel. You pay 50 zuz, you have 50 years of produce. If it was 25 years later, it's 25 zuz.
It's a bargain.
That's the point. So says the Gemara, Afal Gav, even though the Ka'ochel Peretuva, even though he gets a big haul of Peres every year, he only has to pay a zuz. Omarachmana, the Torah tells us, what does the Torah tells us? Koparikle ba'arba zuzah, he can still redeem it for for 4 zuzim. Basically, I meant a sela. So it's a sela per year for 50 years. 4 zuzim equal a sela. Obviously, that was a coin of the realm. It was a good coin. Therefore, what do we see? We see that it's a bargain, like you said, Jay. He could be making a ton of fruit, and all it's costing him is a sela.
The rich man.
The rich man. Therefore, says the Gemara, Hachinami lo shna. Therefore, here too, the one like Ravina who's eating, why is he eating? Because you can eat all the food you can eat for a very nominal amount of money. So he's going to reduce the debt by a little amount, and he's going to eat a whole bunch of fruit. And that's perfectly okay because the Torah says so. In fact, we learned it out from an interesting pasuk because the pasuk says, "Sitza yasher v'atoiv." What does that mean? You should do the right and the good thing. So what does that have to do with anything? So the teretz is that hayasher v'hatoiv means that you have to be open in other words, you can't be closed-fisted when it comes to the interaction between people for parnasa and in this case to stay achuza. You got to be open-minded. In other words, you have to be more liberal in allowing people to do things that will help them. What does it help if if he's only can eat a limit of the mountain? The rest of it goes. What does he do? Right? It doesn't go to Hektish anymore. Hektish doesn't own it anymore. So, so says Ravina, or says the Mazutra, that's the reason why those who eat the fruit at a discount say it's like steyachuza. Steyachuza is the exact same thing. It's a wonderful piece of property, and you get it for a song. So that's
Payros for a song.
What?
You mean they get the payros for a
They
song?
get the payers for a song, exactly.
Not the property.
Yeah, what are they paying? A seller, and they could be making 50 slime worth or more.
It's a good business.
And that's okay. So that's now we understand Ravina's side. What do the others say? Okay, that's a good argument. So what Papa and the others who say you can't eat it, it's a pasuk. Sisa yashav atoiv, stay achuza, you can do it. What's the reason? So now the question is, Umanda Omar, Umanda Osar, those who say it's Osar, Omar Loch will tell you, no, you can't compare it to Sdei Achuza, because the whole thing you learned from Sdei Achuza. Sdei Achuza, Hegdish, Sdei Achuza was Hegdish, V'rachmana Ukma Pirion, um, uh, and the Torah made a special dispensation that when it comes to Sdei Achuza, like I said, from that pasuk, that you're allowed to do it. So that's an exception to the rule, says these Amoraim. Hacha halvahi. Here we're talking about a regular business transaction, a lender and a borrower. What does that have to do with Sdei Achuza and Hegdish? So he wants to distinguish that Sdei Achuza and Hegdish is not a proper comparison to our Gemara, and therefore ribis, and therefore we're back to square one. That when they take the discount, it looks like ribis. So what's the machlokes? The machlokes really boils down to whether or not these Amoraim are arguing over something that the Torah says and how you interpret it. Because again, like everything else, the Torah is open to our understanding and interpretation. It's not always clear. What does it mean, Asisa Yashav? You do the right thing. What is the right thing? So you and I can have a machlokes, what the right thing is, right? We can argue. So we follow, the principles of Rashi and the other Gedolim who comment on the Gemara, on the Chumash. So in this particular case, these Amoraim, they're taking different sides of the coin. And they're saying, one is saying we learn it from Achuza, and the other is saying you can't learn from Hegdish what should happen between commerce between people. So that now is the source, and therefore Ravina, who was Mitzurva of the Rabbanim, and he in fact, maybe should have taken a more stringent view, said no. There's a
when they say you can't rely on Hegdish, is that are they explaining it because Hegdish is unstable? It goes back to the owner?
Because Hegdish had a special dispensation by the Rabbeinu Shalom, right? This pasuk Asisa Yoshev Tov supersedes what is the normal commerce between people. If the Torah says that you should, with Sdei Achuza, you should do the right thing, and we interpret the right thing means that he can redeem it for a seller, even though it's much more money, how can you take that and compare it to a
regular sale,
an everyday event? Exactly. Therefore, he says halva. That's not holy. That's not Asisa Yashav Tov. That's not what the Torah meant when it said Asisa Yashav Tov. Therefore, with halva, we have to be extra careful. And therefore, if someone sees somebody eating a paris, even though it's a reduction, they won't necessarily understand that. See, if it's a reduction, it's not ribbis because he's paying it. But the problem is, you and I will look at it and say it's ribbis. Therefore, the tzur, it's not ribbis, and therefore it's allowed. The tzurva, the rabbanon, of which all of them were, right? They say no, and Ravina did not want to include himself in the tzurva, the rabbanon, so he held that it was a stei achuza, it was like a stei achuza, and therefore you're allowed to eat the fruit. So now we finally understand, because we've had this discussion now for weeks, what is this pledged property eating a discounted fruit? Is it good? Is it not good? So now we see what the machlokes is. The machlokes comes from a pasuk in the Torah which talks about hegdish, and the question is whether a hegdish spills over into the marketplace. So some Mandarim say yes, and some Mandarim say no. You can't compare hegdish to other things. All right. So now we have an understanding of what goes on. So now, in the next little while here, we're going to talk about sort of not really totally connected, but different halachas that stem in this whole question of ribbis. So now, Amar Ravashi. So Ravashi says, Amra le sove de Masa Mechesia, the elders of the town of Mechasia, which was obviously a town in Bavel that had a lot of Talmidei Chachamim, and they made the following statement. We talked about a mashkin. A mashkin obviously is collateral. Remember, we had a discussion that in a mashkin, there are two different places. In some places, you can redeem a mashkin or loan earlier and repay the mashkin. And in some places, you're not allowed to redeem it early. So we saw that machlokes. I mean, that discussion. Okay, so when we say a mashkin, what do we mean? So the Gemara wants to now define what it means to be a mashkin. So, stam mashkanta shata. So Ravashi says that when we use the term mashkin, I give a pledge, it's the minimum of a year. What does that mean? That even in a place where they allow you to redeem early, that you don't have to wait for the full term, a year minimum. You have to give him a year. He's allowed to have it for a year because he made the loan, so therefore he should have the benefit of the land at least for a year. And then afterwards, you're allowed to take it from him. Okay, fine, very good. Frek the Gemara lamai nafkamina. What is the nafkamina, whether it's a year or not a year? So the Gemara says what I just said. The yochale shata, because if the malva was in the property for a year, matzah mesalikle, then after a year, he's allowed to evict him because we're talking about the borrower is allowed to evict the lender because we're talking about a place where early eviction is allowed. But if the year hasn't passed and the malva is still in the property, lo matzah mesalikle. So what is this telling us? That it's further defining to us, because when we said that early redemption was okay, you might have thought, wait a minute, I made the loan and I gave a pledge, and then 6 months later, I had a rich uncle who died, and now I have all the money to repay the loan. And I go to the malveh and I say to the malveh, here's your money. So the Gemara wants to tell us that if a lender did the mitzvah of halva, we have to give him time to get the benefit. What's the benefit? The benefit is the payers. In other words, if all he's going to do is give the loan and then 2 weeks later not, it doesn't. It's what has he really done here? Yeah, he's done a mitzvah. He made a loan, but the Gemara doesn't want him to sort of at least give him a year's time to be able to do something on the field. So that's the nafkamina here. If
this is the lender.
The lender should have at least a year of occupancy on the property to maybe get some benefit from it. Because
This
if
is
he,
something new. We had it the other way around always. The one who borrows the money, he can use the payroll.
right, right. But now we're saying that the lender should have some benefit from the land, whatever benefit that means. You know what? Let me say something different. Forget about he takes payers. What happens if that lender himself does business and he uses that property as collateral for his business?
For another
For
business.
another business. So he wants to know that he has a year's time for that collateral. If that wasn't the case and the collateral could be taken from him a month later, then his whole business is going to go under. I mean, he can't do business. So at least he has to know I can use this collateral for a year
So
and
you
make
don't allow the other lender to pay it off.
correct, correct. So in other words, it's a chain reaction. He's
Yeah.
getting the property, and now he wants to use the property for something else, which he's allowed to. And if you're going to tell him that you can undercut him any point in time, then he can't do business because he wants to make a pledge to somebody else. I'm giving you collateral for a year. Why? Because I have it for a year. I'm not giving it to you for 3 years. I have it for a year. If it turns out to be more, fine, but at least a year. So that's a chain reaction that we're saying that we should not undercut the Malva. He did a good thing. He helped the borrower. He lent him money. Give him some leeway. Give him some opportunity on his own that he should not. So that's Rav Ashi's pronouncement that the mashkanta means a year, and therefore you can't take it back before a year. Okay, that's Rav Ashi's halacha. Now, Ravashi went further, and now we're going to get into an interesting territory. Ravashi, and Rashi said further, Amrli Saba Damasa Bachasya, that the Zakanim of Machasya said to me something else. And as Machasya was a center of Torah, so they were Machadish a lot of Torah. What did they say? My mashkanta. What does the word mashkanta mean? Where does that come from? So they said the shoris is the shchuna gabe, it comes from the word shochen. Mashkanta is a shochen, and shochen means that you live in it. Right? Right? Shochen means to live in it. So mashkanta means
But it meant a partner
a
or a
neighbor.
neighbor.
A neighbor, right? It also means a neighbor, but the root of it is what it says by Yaakov Avinu that he was living in the tents. That he was shochen, that he was in other words he was living there. So we look in the Torah, we see that the word shochen is used to besides a neighbor, it's used for that you're living, you're dwelling there. So the shchuna gabe, that in other words, when I take your mashkin and I'm the lender, I'm living in it. It's as if I'm living in it, right? So that's what these Zakanim of Machasya said is the meaning of the word mishkanta, that it means to live in it. So the fact is that when with the minimum year that I have that property, it's as if I'm living on the property. The property is part of me. Lamai nafkamina. Okay, fine, very good. What's the nafkamina, whether you say that or not? So the Gemara says, Ladina de bar metzra. So there's a famous halacha, which you may have heard of. It's called bar metzra. Bar metzra means that when I own a property, and Jay, you're my neighbor, and we have a very nice relationship, and then I say, I want to sell this property. I'm moving to Florida. I want to sell my property. So the halacha is you have kedima to my property. Now,
First rights.
first right of refusal. I can go ahead and market it, and then someone comes along and wants to pay me a nice sum of money. If you don't want it, I can sell. But if you want it and you want to assemble my property with yours, you pay what the other guy would have paid. And there's no discount. You want to get a fair market. You mean you get an appraisal, whatever. You want to get a fair market. So the din of bar metzra, and by the way, there have been, I know personally, but there have been machlokes batei din There have been cases in Besdin about this inyan of bar mitzvah, whether or not something is considered bar mitzvah. It isn't so, clear and simple. Whether or not there is a halacha, not that there is a halacha, but whether or not something is bar mitzvah. So, in other words, but this bar mitzvah gives a neighbor the right of first refusal, and it's a halacha. It's a halacha. So, what is the nafkamina? So the nafkamina is that if the borrower gave the mashkin to the lender, and the lender is now dwelling, quote unquote, in it, he's considered the neighbor. So if the borrower now wants to sell it to a third party, the lender has kedima. He doesn't own it, but he has kedima to the property because he is the shachen. He is the neighbor.
Borrower doesn't own the property.
No, the borrower owns the property, and he gives a mashkin to the lender for the loan. Now the lender is the mashkin. He's the shachen. He's the dweller. The borrower now wants to sell his property to on the marketplace, and he gets all kinds of interest from people who want to buy it.
I'm confused.
Okay, I lend you 100 zuz, 100 slime, whatever. You, the borrower, give me a mashkin. The mashkin is a property. Now, we know there's all kinds of halachas about it. First, Rav Ashi said that you can't take it back from me at least for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And now Rav Ashi is saying there's another halacha. The halacha is that even though I, the lender, don't own it, I'm holding it as a mashkin, right? I don't own it. When it comes to bar mitzvah, I am the neighbor. In other words, I don't have to have another property adjacent to this one, like the classic case of bar mitzvah. If you want to sell it, I have first right of refusal. So you can go into the marketplace and get offers, but you have to sell it to me first. Why would you think that should be okay? I don't own the property. I just have it as a collateral. Says the Ziknei Mechasia, no. When it comes to, if I already did a good deed, again, this all around the question of chesed and doing the right thing. If I lend it to you, it means I did a good deed for you. I helped you. I gave you money, right? Yes, you'll repay me everything, but you needed the money, and I did a good thing. So all these issues that we're talking about are a way of showing hakoras hatov in a way to the lender for doing the right thing. It's a mitzvah.
But he can't sell his own collateral, his
No,
own
he can't.
field.
No, the borrower can. The borrower owns the field. Jay,
we're talking about the collateral that the borrower puts up on the table.
And he's allowed to sell that.
That collateral is still his.
It's still his, and now he wants to sell it on the marketplace.
He's allowed to sell it in the middle?
He's allowed to sell it in the middle.
Doesn't he have to replace it with a different collateral?
Oh, so this is the question. The question is, according to the first ruling of Rav Ashi, he cannot sell it for a year.
Right.
But let's just say, for argument's sake, it was after a year, or he had buyers within the year, and he went to the seller and says, "I want to sell." Yeah, the seller, the lender can say no dice, or he can say, "That's okay, you can do it, but I want to buy it.
I get first rights. Yeah.
I get first right of refusal." That's bar mitzvah.
Okay.
But what's the chiddush? The chiddush is that I don't own it. I'm not a neighbor in the classic sense that I own a property next to yours. The teretz is that the chiddush is that when you make a loan, the chachamim, the zikanim there said, you did a good thing, we're going to give you sort of an extra merit, that you become the shochen for purposes of bar mitzvah. Now, he may never sell it. It may be irrelevant. But if he does sell it, and it's a nice piece of property, why shouldn't the lender, they're saying, have some kedima? He's still giving the borrower the same price he would get from the third guy, but he's the benefit. So that's the chiddush. Those are the two chidushim.
And the benefit is not considered ribbis.
Not considered ribbons. No.
It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous
Why?
because I can go in and say, okay, this guy wants to borrow money. I can go in and say, look, it's a chance for me to acquire additional property. So I'm going to be a good guy, quote unquote, and I'm going to lend him money.
Right.
Under the provision that if he wants to sell it, I get a right. So again,
Michael, only for the year, not la'olam.
But there are so many ifs in this.
But why? In other words,
because it's a benefit. It's a benefit. It is you're buying a right. You're lending in order to get a right to buy during that time period.
That's right.
And you're saying you're not getting any return. In all this stuff, the guy's goodness of his heart, it takes away what you're supposed to be doing as a yid to another yid.
That's right. So the Zakanim of Machashia said, Michael, you're 100% right. He's not entitled to anything. But if the circumstance arises where the borrower has an opportunity to sell at a good price, then why is it ribbis? He's going to sell it. You're going to sell it to Jay, and Jay's going to be the buyer. But why should you sell it to Jay?
So let me ask you, Rabbi, if he matches the price, and then the others who are bidding on it say, "I want to raise it."
Yes.
Does he have to pay the raised price, or does he get to buy it at the price that was first announced?
When he made the kinyan and he bought it, the deal between him and the borrower is over. If he now wants to flip it because he finds a buyer who wants to pay him much more, then remember there is no ribbis by mechira. In a sale, there's no ribbis. So,
yes, but the ribbis is giving him the priority to buy.
Right.
That is ribbis. That is you're getting something in return for the right to lend. You're not lending out of the goodness of your heart purely. You're saying, if I get the chance to buy this property, I'm going to get first rights under that rule. And you want to give him something? I mean, this is taking away from what the essence of ribbis is, all the way through. And I'm asking you, if they say they establish a price for it, and then this guy says, I'm buying and I'm matching that price, and the other potential buyers say, I'm willing to up it. Does the lender can he up it, or could he state that this was the price you quoted? That's it. I get it. You can't raise it again, because then he's got. I mean, this was
Michael. They make a kinyan. Michael, they make a kinyan, and the kinyan means that the transaction is final.
Wait a minute. The kinyan is that they may. So somebody buys it, doesn't know that this guy has a security interest in this property. He doesn't know there's someone who can override him. So he makes a kinyan to buy to sell for this certain price, and then the lender comes along and says, "Okay, I'm going to match their price." And it's a chance for the borrower to make more money if they say, "Well, look, I'll raise the price there." So does that mean the lender has to match that, or when you say it's a kinyan?
No. When I say kinyan, let me be clear. The lender lends him 100 sloim. He gets a piece of property. Time goes by, let's say a minimum of a year. Borrower changes his mind and said, I want to now sell this property. I'm putting it on the marketplace. It's a nice piece of property. People come and they mill around and they say, all right, we're going to offer you 200 sloim for this property. We want to buy it. So the borrower says, that's a good deal, but I have one issue. I mean, whether he articulates it or not, in the back of his mind, he says, I have a bar mitzvah. I have a lender whom I still owe money to.
There's a lien on the land.
So to speak, right? But he hasn't said that to third-party buyers.
And that's wrong. because they think that they're buying in good faith, and he is not disclosed to them.
But Michael, the borrower doesn't know with absolute certainty that the lender wants to buy it. They never discussed it.
But again, this is supposed to be free trade. So the guy makes a kinyan with a buyer, and you're saying that because of this law that the Torah says that is an option that he gets, he doesn't have to disclose that I have this. Correct. So the guy makes it in good faith. He makes a purchase. Then this guy comes along and says,
"No, but he hasn't made the purchase yet." In other words, we're not at the point where the kinyan was made between the buyer and the seller. That's what I want to clarify. In other words, the borrower who sells it to the third person did not make a kinyan. He accepted an offer and he said, "Okay, let me think about it."
There are two different things. Yeah. He accepted an offer means there's offer and acceptance. It's a deal. If he wants to think about it, that's a different story. You're saying he doesn't disclose, so he from an ethical standpoint, he has to disclose. Look, I can sell to you, but let me see if the buyer who has a security interest and a right to buy this is going to pay the same price. Right. The guy comes back to him and says, "You know what? I'll up it." If he comes back, I'll up it.
Then the Bava Metzia has to up it too.
So, okay. So, because there's not offer and acceptance.
No. At the end of the day, the Bava Metzia has to pay the best price that the borrower would get in the marketplace. Now, let's say you and I have a transaction. Let's say I borrow money from you and you have my pledge. Everything is fine and good. Someone comes and says, "I like your field. I want to give you extra. I want to give you 500 sloim." 500 sloim. I'm good with that. I want to buy it. I'm absolutely going to sell it. It still is in his possession. He has J is the malva. Everything good and fine. He at that point, there's no reason for him to disclose to you that there's a bar mitzvah because you made him an offer on a piece of property, and he says, "Let me think about it." Halacha says I have to go to Jay because Jay, according to the halacha, is the bar mitzvah, and I have to say, "Jay, I have an offer for 500 sloim. You get first refusal. Do you want to buy it?"
And he doesn't have to disclose that to the other potential buyer.
No.
That's ridiculous.
Why?
Because this guy needs to know that it may not be a sale. So he could say, if he's going to buy it, then I'm raising my price to, it should be conditioned. I mean, we're taking a guy.
Michael, let me just say something. In the original deal, there was no discussion between me, the borrower, and you, the lender, about ownership. It was a straight halva, a straight loan. We never have a havamina that there's going to be a sale.
Exactly. And the idea that this first was put up for collateral. That's the only reason it was put up.
Only reason.
And I have a real problem with using the property when it's for collateral purposes, that you're allowed to go in and take a position that this is my property while it's collateralized. It's only, to me, collateral.
Rav Ashi quoted that was what
But collateral is supposed to be if I don't pay you by the certain time. But that's not what this is. So now you're going a step further. You're not.
They have rights in the collateral. What Rav Ashi is saying is that the Metzia say not only is it collateral, but you have rights in the collateral,
and that you have rights beyond that. If he's going to sell, you are putting shackles on the borrower. It's okay.
Why do you say that?
Because
the borrower is free to make any deal he wants to make, and in the
to not disclose that
behind the back of the
guy has the right
of the lender.
But hold on. The borrower and the lender never discussed a sale. Right. It wasn't as if they had a deal.
But wait a minute. But implicit in this is that he has the right of first.
I have right of right. The halacha says
the collateral won't be sold in the middle
maybe
of the
90%. Hold on. Maybe 90% of the time, a lender is not interested in buying the property. He just wants to lend and make some money.
But isn't there, Michael's saying, isn't there an assumption when you put up collateral
Yes.
that collateral cannot be sold or do anything with it other than the collateral is the collateral for the loan?
What? No such assumption. Where do you make that assumption?
Well,
Why?
that's what collateral is. So he should have to substitute other collateral if he's going to sell.
Yes, he can do that. He can say,
Before he sells the property.
this piece of property is collateral. If it turns out he has a buyer and the seller is a bar mitzvah, and he says, but I'll do you a favor. You sell it and give me a different piece of property as collateral. That's 100% okay. As long as the bar mitzvah had that first right of refusal, he can refuse it and say, I'm not going to buy it. Just give me something else for collateral. So in other words, but Michael, when you and I transact, in the back of my mind, I'm not thinking I'm going to sell it.
Rabbi, in this day and age, you do a search on the deed. It's incumbent upon the person who has the property to disclose that this guy has a right of refusal. They didn't have deeds to check on in those days. So the borrower who has this piece of land, it's incumbent upon him to tell the seller that I will sell it to you, but this guy has the right of refusal inherent in this before he sells the property. And that changes the dynamic of what the buyer is going to do.
What Michael is saying,
I understand what Michael
is that everybody knows when you have a deal like this, without specific writing it all down, that if somebody wants to sell it, the lender has the first choice. That should have been common.
But it was, Michael, Jay, it was common now. Anybody who was a Talmud Chacham understood.
Yeah, but they didn't know the situation in this property's case because he didn't disclose it.
He
should have to disclose that there's a right of refusal from the lender that's inherent in this because it is a security interest for a loan that I have.
The Chachamim should have made that rule. And that's what, Michael, I agree with you. The Chachamim should have made it publicly known that if you try and sell it, the lender has first choice.
To know that, he has to know that there is a security interest in it, because then by definition he knows it, but he doesn't know that.
No. But
does that not affect your offer? Does that not say?
No, because
I disagree.
Because the person making the offer is making it in good faith because he doesn't know if the collateral holder is going to want to compete with him. To him, it's worth 50, 100 slime, 200 slime. So he makes the best offer he can make, and with that. In other words,
but if there's a competitive bid, Rabbi, it changes your approach. If you want that land, there's facts not in evidence that you need to know because it might change how you offer. So what it's saying is,
tell me why. No, okay.
Force you to raise the bid.
Tell me why do you think it changes the offer if the person who wants the property?
Because the guy doesn't know that there's a competitive bidder. So he doesn't know that his bid is subject to being challenged.
Okay, so let me recast the facts. So the borrower has this property. He pledged this collateral. Now he wants to sell it, and he puts it on the market, or someone swoops in and makes him an offer. But let's say he puts it on the market and says, "I have a piece of property, and this property I want such and such. And when someone makes me an offer, I'll consider I'm not going to say you make me the offer and it's an offer and acceptance. I'll consider the offer. So you make the best offer you can of the property. You're not going to make an offer. I mean, you could sort of reduce the price, but you'll make an offer upon which you want to pay. Now, do I have to disclose to you that there are other bidders? Forget about the bar mitzvah, not the bar mitzvah. Let's say there are other bidders, 3 other bidders out there who are bidding on the property. Do I have to disclose to you when you make me an offer that there are other bidders? Do you think I have to do that?
So the thing is that in this case, you have to, because if I may change my bid. So if he offers you that, I will increase my bid by 50%. If he exercises his right. If I don't know that, I can't put that in my offer.
Right, right. This will drive up the offer prices
Right,
for somebody else
right,
if they know there's
right. Exactly,
somebody else who has first rights.
exactly.
Because the guy may really want that piece of property. And then the lender can say, well, I have first choice on it and drag him along.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, the new buyer who wants that property, he'll raise his offer.
Okay. Okay.
The side effects of
I hear
him
you,
knowing changes the scene. Whereas if he knew ahead of time that there was another first right person, that would be part of his initial offer.
Precisely.
Okay. So all right, I hear you. So let's state
I
the
like
facts.
Michael's.
No, Michael, you're right. So let's state the facts as follows.
I vote with Michael.
Okay. All right. No, it's a fair question. So here's the facts. The facts are that I lent you, Jay, I borrowed from you. I gave you the mashkin, and yeah, you're allowed to hold it for a year. We're talking about not Amaratzin. We're talking about people who understand that's the halacha. So now I have to say, okay, so now the question is, do I put it on the market or someone comes to me and says, I want your property? It may be different, but let's just say.
But Rabbi, I want to stop you for 1 second. If the requirement is that he's in it for a year, then he can't sell it until after that year's up.
Correct.
So he can put a contingency in there that says, I'm going to sell this to you when it's almost like he has to disclose it because the guy doesn't know when he has to buy it.
Yes.
So why not force him to disclose it? And then the guy says, when it's done, I will pay you X, because it's not available for sale right now.
That's correct.
Has to disclose that in the term.
For a year.
But Michael, in those times, it wasn't like today, which is a big wide world of complications. If I have a property that I put up for collateral for a loan, it's known. It isn't a secret. This property that now Jay has is collateral for a loan he gave me, and he could use it for a year.
I don't know why you say it wasn't publicized.
No, but
it's a private transaction.
No.
How do you say that everybody knew about it?
Again, it is something that we have to assume that in a small community, we're not talking about in Mechasia or anywhere else. We're not talking about international travelers who go, overseas and buy property in another place, and people don't know. You have to understand it in the focus of where we are. We're in a shtetl. And all this Gemara is talking about localized transactions. So it's known that you have the property and you have it for a year, and I can't sell it. Now, I went ahead and thought about it and said, you know what? I'm going to try to make a deal that will come into fruition in a year from now. In other words, I want to make a deal. It won't happen now. It'll happen a year from now. Or I didn't do that at all. You heard about this piece of property and said, I like this property. I know that Jay is the lender and Jay has the rights to the property for a year. He's a mashkin. So I'm going to make an offer on the property. Now, I could wait a year, but I'm going to make an offer on the property now so that I can get first place on this property. So you have a variety of different scenarios. The Gemara isn't locked into one scenario. We're trying to figure out different approaches to what is going on here. Says the Gemara, regardless of how the deal came, I made you an offer, you put it on the marketplace, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Jay, who is the lender for the year that he has the collateral, he is a bar metzia, because by definition, he's the neighbor. So if anything happens in that year, now we could make a transaction, you and I, Michael, that is only contingent on happening a year and a day after the loan, so that you know in advance that there is no bar mitzvah because it's going to happen in a year from a day. And as long as you know that, you're coming in with open eyes. Yes, I'll be happy to make that deal, and I'm going to wait. I'm not going to make the deal
Yeah,
now.
but again, this guy has the first right of
No,
refusal.
no, no. So if we made the deal now, the bar mitzvah would come into place. I agree with you, but we're not going to make. We're going to a wink and a nod that a year and a day from now we're going to make a transaction. This
And
is
if
bar
the
mitzvah.
and if the lender comes in and says, "Look, I'll forgive your loan as part of the purchase price, and I'm going to give you more than he offered you," he has the right to do that during the
Absolutely,
year.
absolutely.
And I as a buyer come in there saying, when it's over, I'm going to get the rights to it, and we make a kinyan that I bought it, after that time.
Right.
So after the loan period is over, the minimum loan period is over, he sells it to a third party after. At the time of the security interest, and he says, "I'm going to buy it." Does this guy, who's the lender, have the right during the year to override that and buy it during that year because he has the right of refusal?
Oh, so you know what right he has? He has a right to go to the borrower and say to the borrower, I want to buy your field, and this is what I'm prepared to pay. The borrower can say yes or no. If he's getting a price that includes a forgiveness of the loan, which means that he's really getting more than the market is offering, he can turn around and sell it to the bar mitzvah, to the lender for that particular price. The other guy comes out of nowhere and says, I'll pay the same thing. Sorry.
Yes, but it's a contingent deal. So
No, the deal can happen in the year. You don't have to wait for a year to
I
happen.
understand that, but
Right.
we talked about to avoid the bar mitzvah
Right.
from coming into play. So
Right.
the buyer comes in and makes a deal, and they have a kinyan that I'm going to buy this.
No. Okay, let me stop you. They cannot make a kinyan. A kinyan means the transaction is now complete. That's what a kinyan means. They can have a discussion, and before a kinyan is made, the borrower has to go to the lender. You're the bar mitzvah. I'm about to make a deal. Are you interested in this property? No kinyan was yet made, Michael.
But again, Rabbi, that should be a disclosure required to a potential buyer.
But inherent in our situation, people know that
How do they know?
because it's
Like you said, it's not telegraphed. I mean,
it's a small community, and they know that this property is pledged. In other words, when I come in and I negotiate with you, yes, you tell me it's pledged. You're not hiding. I'm the borrower. I'm not hiding from you that the property is not pledged. In fact, I say to you, Michael, you want to buy this property? I can't sell it to you for a year. Why can't you sell it to me? Because I have a pledge to a lender. Immediately, you, the buyer, have to, in your mind, say, aha, there is
that's the key.
Yes.
That he has to disclose it.
It's disclosed. Yes, it's disclosed in and of itself because he's telling him, I can't sell it to you for a year because I've pledged it to Jay, and Jay is a lender. Now,
Okay,
but
so that's disclosure. That's disclosure. You
Right.
said he doesn't have to disclose it.
No. When I mean he doesn't have to disclose, I mean in the discussion of the negotiation, if he doesn't say anything to him, it's not prohibited. At some point in time, he has to disclose. In other words, in the discussion, he can say, huh. Now, again, I can't tell you with certainty because I wasn't there. But in small communities or in communities that we're talking about, if a person makes a pledge, people know about it.
Well, so the answer is that
Let's just say, yeah, I may. You're a wealthy owner from another community, and you send a shliach, and the shliach comes in and it says to you, "There's a gorgeous piece of property here. Do you want to make an offer?" He says, "Absolutely. I'm going to offer 500 sloim." Ooh, that's a remarkable price, 500 sloim. So now I'm the borrower, and I say 500 sloim. I would take that deal in a heartbeat, but I can't do anything because it's a year. I have to wait a year.
So I want to clarify this because I heard a contradictory point.
Go ahead.
So he says I'm going to, if the borrower sells the property, he cannot make a contingent sale before the end of the year period.
Correct.
Okay. Well, but he can sell it to the lender before the end of that period.
Correct.
So I still say that the lender is getting an advantage. He's paying for the right to buy this property.
That's what the definition of mashkin means, that he gets the first right. Correct.
Which is getting something for the loan. It is getting a return on the loan because I have a right of first refusal on purchasing this land. And to say that that's not ribis and he's not getting something is
okay.
It's a real problem.
So I hear what you're really asking. You're saying that the ribis of the sale is the benefit of the loan.
Yes.
Therefore, the loan triggers ribis, i.e., a sale.
Yes.
Okay. Now I understand your question. That was really at the heart of all this discussion. So
Yeah.
you want to say that it's ribis because the loan triggered an opportunity. Fine. Now let me respond to you. If I didn't sell it to you, the bar metzra, not to Jay, the bar metzra, and I sold it to you, the third party, is there ribis?
Well, the problem
No, just tell me, is there ribis?
Yes, because I can't
No.
sell it to a third party.
No, Michael, it's not true. I can sell it to you. The bar mitzvah doesn't have to buy it. I can sell it to you every day of the week. But if I sell it to you, am I chayiv in ribis because I sold it to you, the third party? Answer is no.
No. But I for a year I can't sell it. If I got that offer, I couldn't sell it.
Correct.
Until the end of the year. But
Correct.
if I'm the lender, I have the right to buy it within that year that nobody else has.
Opportunity is not that opportunity, Michael, that you think is ribis as an opportunity. It's a very fluid thing because
yes, but during that year,
not a solid. No, second, it's a theoretical opportunity. But it really has no feet to stand.
But that's not true. In today's world, it has everything
I never
to
wanted
do
that
with it.
piece of land.
No, it's a right to do. I have the right of refusal.
Call it an opportunity. Can an opportunity
it's a
be
right.
ribis?
It's a right. It's not an opportunity. It's a right. You can't sell it.
Yeah, but I think the key here, Michael, and Jay, the key here is no one is putting a gun to the borrower's head. And he has free reign of what he wants to do. He can decide, I like Jay. He's my lender. I'm not going to do anything for a year. And a year and a day later, I'm going to sell it to Jay outright. Or he can say, Michael, I like you a lot. And I want to make a deal with you, but I can't today because I have a bar mitzvah. Let's just table the deal for a year and a day, and then you and I can transact without any shackles. The borrower can do all of that. Now, let's say Jay doesn't want the property, and I sell it to you, Michael, there clearly is no ribis. We all agree there's no ribis. You're asking that if Jay buys the property and has the right to buy the property, that seems to be ribis from the loan. That's what you're asking.
Yes.
Okay. So my answer is that we've said many times before, the borrower has options.
You said he can't sell it during the 1 year period.
Yeah, but who says he wants to sell it during the 1 year?
But I don't understand why he can't put a contingent deal out there for a year and a day afterward, and
Who says he
The
can't?
period's over. You said he
who's-
can't do it during the year. He can't sell it to a third party
No,
owner.
but who says that we can't do a contingent transaction that will become that will exercise in a year and a day? There's no halacha that says you can't do that.
Well, wait a minute.
But
Does
the
does
borrower
the
may not
lender-
want to give. No, the borrower may not want to wait a year and a day. He may say, "I have a wonderful opportunity to sell my field and do a flip into something and make a lot of money. I want to do it in 6 months." Now we have a problem because if he wants to do it within 6 months, there's a bar mitzvah. A year and a day, there's no longer a bar mitzvah.
But he should be able to substitute collateral at that moment that he wants to sell it. Otherwise, he's restricted.
Only if the lender agrees.
But see,
The lender has to agree. Remember, the lender did a chesed here. And
no, he didn't. He got
No,
something for it.
No. He did a chesed by lending money. The Bnei Mechasia and the Torah says, "Asisa yashav atov." Do the right thing, and you're a tzaddik. I lent the money. Now wait a minute. Mike Jay is the lender. He has no expectations of anything, but the Torah says that if there's something going to come out of this, Jay has to be compensated, not because he wants to, because the Yosher and the Tov says for doing the right thing, he has certain rights. That's what the Beit Mechasi are saying. What are the rights? The rights are the rights of Bar Metzra, but Bar Metzra is not open-ended. Bar Metzra is only for the period of time that the transaction takes place, i.e., a minimum of a year. Let's say we made a deal. You and I made a deal with Jay that I'm going to take a 5-year loan, but I'm living in a community where I can repay early. What is early? The halacha is early as a year. Let's say I'm not ready to pay in a year. Let's say I need more time. A year passes, 2 year passes. Now I get an offer for a property that makes sense to me. I want to buy it. But I haven't repaid the loan. So the inyan of Bar Metzra still applies. It doesn't apply for 1 year and go away. It's a minimum of a year. But
Rabbi, I should have the ability to sell that property in 6 months, and I can get a return for it. And if I have to wait the year to repay the loan, the fact that he gets to use the field and the produce, which it's supposed to be collateral if I don't pay, but in that situation, that he should be able to sell the property. The lender should be able to, because of the bar mitzvah, should be able to use the property for a year, and he should be able to sell it now with rights taking over in a year and a day from that, so he doesn't prepay, and he should be able to do that without the rights of the lender to buy it.
Okay, so what we're saying is that the lender has limited rights. He lent the money, and he has a minimum of a year. If I'm the borrower and I come to Jay and I say, Jay, do me a favor. I really need this property for other purposes. I'm going to, whatever it is. Can you take another piece of property as a mashkin? And Jay says yes. Then I'm free and clear to sell, and there's no answer. But I have to disclose that I need this property because I want to sell it. Oh, you want to sell it? I want to buy it, says Jay. So there has to be open communication as to what's going on. Jay can always say, Gesundheit, sell it. I don't want the property, in which case there's no bar mitzvah inyan. But if Jay does want the property, the Torah tells us, and this is what the Bnei Mechaze are being mechadish, this is the halacha, the chiddush, that as long as Jay has rights, meaning for a year, as long as he has rights, he's a bar mitzvah. So in that year, you can do nothing unless Jay is willing to forego.
But that makes no sense.
Why?
Because you can sell it and say the bar mitzvah has, because of the bar mitzvah, the lender has the right for a year. I'm selling it to you now independently. The sale date is fixed a year and a day after.
Correct.
And so the lender should have no rights in that situation. and they're using the property, so they get paid in full and they get the payrolls from the property. But that's not interest.
That's not interest.
And
the only reason why it's not interest,
because the idea of a loan with a security interest is not so you can use it. It's if and only if.
Yeah. So let me recast the words in a different way. A bar metzra does not interfere with ribbis. Let's start with that point. That a bar metzra and ribbis do not clash, meaning that if I have rights as a bar metzra, that's a separate right the Torah gives me and has nothing to do with ribbis. I have a right as a bar metzra if you didn't lend me if I didn't lend you the money. In other words,
how so?
Because I'm your neighbor. Now, if I'm your neighbor because of the loan, if I'm your regular neighbor,
but then you're not a neighbor. I mean, a neighbor is adjacent. You're getting the title of neighbor because you lent this guy money.
Right.
That is a benefit that you would not otherwise have.
Right. But there's nothing set in stone that Jay, as the lender, will exercise his right to being a bar metzra. That is not a given. If it was a given, then I would say to you, yes, there's an exchange here and it's ribbis. In other words, it looks like ribbis if I'm going to transact. The minute the loan is made, Jay says to me, you know what? If you want to go ahead and sell that property, I'm your buyer. So then you can say, wait a minute, that loan has ribbis, i.e. the right to buy. But there was no discussion between us. There's an inherent understanding that you're a bar metzra, but there's no discussion that you're going to sell it.
But it's inherent that you're getting that. You're saying it's not linked, but it is linked. But there wouldn't be a linkage if you did not lend the money.
Michael, there's no guarantee that anything will happen.
That's correct.
Well, but wait a minute.
An opportunity if
an opportunity comes up. Right. Correct.
I'm confused. I thought I heard this two different points on the same thing. If I'm a borrower and I put up a piece of property as a security interest, can I sell that property in a contingent sale to a third party buyer after which it takes place after the year, and that's going to enable me to repay my loan. So I've got the full year, and I can make that deal day one without the lender having the right to get in there, because the deal is taking place 1 year and a day after the loan.
A 3-year loan. A 3-year loan
and he has a right of prepayment. So he should be at the end of the year and a day, which is what the minimum they're saying is, he should be able to say, I'm going to sell you this property a year and a day. We have a kinyan. We made the deal without any restrictions, because the effective date of the deal is after the 1 year minimum period. And so the lender should not have any rights in that, because the deal is after the required 1 year minimum period. And I'm asking, is that? I thought I heard you say he can't sell it even with a future date during the period.
Well, if he has two more bidders,
all right. So
day and a half, a day, 1 day in a year. If he has two more bidders on the side, then it complicates the question of, is it an open sale?
Well, it should be an open sale after the 1 year period. There's a 1 year period where he can't prepay under this. He should be able to sell it day one on 1 year and a day later without having the requirement of the lender being able to purchase it.
Okay.
I think that's the case.
All right.
No, it's not.
All right. So
after 1 year, the lender doesn't have any opportunities.
But if I understood correctly, during the 1 year period, even if he makes a future sale, the lender has the right to make the purchase.
1 second. It's the 365-day opportunity. Any day after 365, there's no opportunity different than anybody else in the marketplace.
Well, but this is the point. So on day 366, he has a sale arranged on day 366. If I understood Rabbi Grauman correctly, the lender still has the right to make that purchase because
But
he
that's a
made that
separate
sale
contract.
within the first 365 days, even though it's going to take place later.
But
No, no.
that would have to be a separate sale contract. That
Yeah.
on
So, all
day
right. So,
366, I'll
okay.
buy the field from you.
Okay. So Michael, let me just introduce something else again where it's tied into something else that we haven't yet discussed. So we will discuss next week. If if I make a deal with you that's contingent on a future event, meaning I'm going to sell it to you in a year and a day. You have no rights to it today, but we will make a deal. Th that contract, that agreement does not come into play until a year and a day, meaning it can be voided. Because the only way a contract is valid is if there's a Kenyan. Since we're not making a Kenyan, because we can't, because the lender is a bar mitzvah, so
Uh,
you and I have an understanding of what's going to happen. There is a thing, and again, we'll talk about it next week, as a davar shelo bo la'olam. This discussion, which I didn't want to get into right now, but you're pushing the point and saying that a davar shelo bo la'olam, something that has not yet come into the world, meaning the contract between me and you is hanging out there, but has not actually happened. So there is a discussion whether a davar shelo bo la'olam can even have any legs, because I can retract. Just because I said I'm going to sell it to you for a certain price a year from a day doesn't mean that I can't change my mind. The market went crazy, and now I have the opportunity to sell it for far more money. I'm not going to sell it to you for this amount of money because we never made a Kenyan. As long as a Kenyan is not made, oral discussions you can have all day long, but it has to be a Kenyan to make it. So, Michael, if a Kenyan isn't made, then the fact that we have a future agreement a year and a day after the loan is a discussion, but is not a reality. Now, that machlekes of davar shabola olam put aside for a moment, but the reality is that you and I cannot transact for a period outside of the year period. We can have a discussion and we can table it and say, I don't want to make a deal now. A year from now, when I repay, I have the money, I'm going to repay the lender. He'll no longer be the bar mitzvah. Then you and I will transact. We may transact at the price that we've agreed to now or not. Maybe the price will be maybe the price will be less or more, and I make an agreement. If it's less, it's this amount. If it's more, in other words, you can do anything you want.
So, Rabbi, under halacha, you cannot, the deal doesn't take hold until
The Kenyan,
that day.
that's
And
correct.
that a Kenyan cannot occur
In advance.
until the
That
day the deal is
exactly,
paid. Okay.
exactly.
That is something I did not know.
Oh, okay. So that helps clarify that this whole discussion is is contingent on the fact that you want to get around the bar mitzvah. Now, you may want to get around him because I like you better. It's not because I'm getting more money. Jay would give me the same amount of money, but I like you. I want you to have the property, and
I like
therefore
Michael too.
Therefore, I want to make a deal with you. But my hands are tied because a mashkin is at least for a year. I've got to respect Jay that he has the rights for a year. And then maybe I'll come to like Jay a lot and I'll say, Jay, I'll make a deal with you. In other words, it's somewhat fluid because we're not yet set in any deal other than that 1 year. So what the Bnei Mechuzah are telling us Bnei Mechasia are telling us that a minimum mashkin is for a year, and the mashkin holder is a bar mitzvah. Now, taken together, those two things give the lender, Jay, certain rights. But I, the borrower, am not tied 100% to Jay. I'm not tied to him that because I borrowed money that I have to make him the bar mitzvah. I can decide otherwise. In your scenario, Michael, I understand that what you want to say is that if there's a deal done, then it's kind of, it's trickery. But this is a clean slate.
So,
I
Rabbi, let me clarify.
Yeah,
So, in the first year, if he wants to sell, he can only sell to the lender.
correct. Or or
After,
or or he can sell to a third party and the lender can be Michael and say, I'll take another property. That can happen.
but he has to get permission
He has to get permission. He has to get permission.
from the lender to do that. So,
Yeah,
in making a transaction, that has to be resolved before he can make
correct.
it.
Correct.
On day 366, does he have the right to sell the party to a third property to a third party because he's completed the year, or does the lender, because of bar mitzvah, still have the right?
No, if the borrower says in day 366 to the lender, thank you so much, I'm returning the 100 slarm of the loan. The deal is off. The loan is complete. Now he turns around to you and says, I want to sell it to you. Then Jay has no rights as a bar mitzvah because he's
Okay,
not a bar
but he's
mitzvah.
got to pay off the loan
He's got to
first.
pay off the loan.
Okay. All
Exactly.
right. Now but the thing about a Kenyan, which I thought you could make a Kenyan in advance,
No, you can't. You can't make it.
that's what I didn't know. So
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you for
Okay. So now that helps clarify that you can't make the Kenyan in advance. Therefore, I can have discussions and agreements, but I have to, I have to. But again, I, as the borrower, may be compelled to sell because not only did I borrow money from Jay, but I need a certain amount of money for something else. So that triggers the question of now, I don't want to wait a year to sell. I want to wait. I want to sell to you now. Now I have to go to the bar mitzvah and say, I have an opportunity to make a sale and I want to make that sale. You have certain rights. I can't take those rights away from you. Do you want to buy? He may say, no, but I want to continue to lend. Then I, the borrower, have to make arrangements to give the lender another piece of property and take this property and sell it to you.
Okay.
Okay, so in other words, there are some complications here, but the fact is that these are competing interests: the interest of a loan, the interest of a bar mitzvah, and they come to clash here. So the Torah says a loan is a loan, and you have to do that. But the Torah also says that bar mitzvah has rights. So now we have to juggle, and we have to figure out who does what to whom. And there may come a point in time where the borrower is tied; his hands are tied. I can't. The lender doesn't want to give up the property. He wants this property for collateral. I have no choice. I can't sell it out from under him because I give it to him a mashkin. Mashkin is a year. So those may be competing interests, Michael. Now, what I said about Davar Shalabola Olam, which next week will come into clarification more clearly, is that something that hasn't yet come about because it's a future interest. There's a machlokes where the Davar Shalabola Olam has any legs. Some say yes, some say no. Because the Davar Shalabola Olam means it's not here, it's not in existence. How can I make a transaction on something that doesn't exist? Now, we know today in the marketplace, I can buy futures, right? Futures is a Davar Shalabola Olam. Am I allowed to do it? Well, no one is stopping me. But the question is that a davar shlobola olam, which under halacha does not have any kiyum? That's what's fascinating is that they didn't sell futures back in the day. Today we sell futures, and that's a different story. Anyway, it's a fascinating discussion. I'm glad we really were able to.
I just want to mention, Rabbi, I'm looking at the Israel news, but Israel put the security cabinet on alert because the U.S. is threatening to attack Iran because of all the protests.
All the people killed. Yeah.
Yeah, so
this could be a big issue now.
It could be big deal. Yeah, this is changing every minute, I think.
Yeah. No, we'll follow it carefully. In any event, Mitzvah Shem, next week we'll pick it up, and I'm hoping we'll finish the sugya to the Mishnah, which I hope we would do today. But I'm more than happy that we went through this in great detail. So now we understand the competing interests of bar mitzvah and ribbis and all of that. And again,
Good,
ribbis is
good clarification by
Yeah.
having this give and take.
yeah. So ribbis
Thank
is
you,
why.
Rabbi, and Michael.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
And Jay.
Next week we'll be in the final leg here, and we'll try to finish.